This week, we've got Matt Foster, the founder of Parenting Network, and we're here in Portsmouth.
So I started to be a bit isolated as a parent, and I was also aware that there weren't any services for dads, and eventually founded Dadzclub and then the Parenting Network. We haven't just popped up. We're actually 9 years old, and we've been supporting this city behind the scenes for a long time. We're now a team of 30 paid staff, 50 if you include our students and volunteers. We have 3 venues. We're in 5 family hubs in this city. We're in Southampton and Isle of Wight. We've got the busiest baby bank outside of London. We've got the most successful boots on the ground physical service for dads. There's bigger online ones, but we're the ones that are doing the work on the ground. We have collaboratively built this now, this big behemoth of an organisation that is probably the biggest and most influential third sector organisation that Portsmouth has.
Great, so Matt, welcome to the What's Going On show.
Thank you very much. Really excited to take part.
Cool, yeah, no, I'm excited for this one. I don't know a lot about your backstory, and for that, I mean, I've heard dribs and drabs, and you've told me in the past briefly, but yeah, but today we'll go a bit more into that. So
A bit
deeper, yeah.
Yeah.
So right now we're in the Forge, your new place, as you will, your new digs.
It is, yeah. It's kind of HQ, kind of a home for some of our projects, and hopefully a safe space for lots of people that live in the city, hopefully.
No, fair enough. Okay, so cool. Cracking on with the show. So welcome to the What's Going On show, the show where we shine the light on people doing things in communities. And you yourself, you are the founder and CEO, right? Yes. Of the Parenting Network. So we're going to dig into that today. Now, first of all, a little tradition I've got on this show is, instead of me giving you an introduction, I like to just give it straight over to you. So who in a nutshell is Matt Foster?
So I am, first and foremost, I am a family man. I'm a dad. Grew up in Paulsgrove in the 80s. Went to a school that doesn't exist anymore, King Richard's, and went on to spend my career in the third sector, and eventually founded Dadzclub and then the Parenting Network.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So some stuff to unpick there. So you said you grew up in Paulsgrove.
That's right, yeah.
How was that?
The 80s was a time. In fact, I loved the 80s vibe, but I grew up in a council estate in the 80s, lone child for much of that, but it was hard. So a lot of what I've gone on to do now came from experiences from when I was young. So initially I grew up without a dad. So my birth dad has never been part of my life. So it was me and my mum, and then a step parent came along, a step partner, a deeply troubled, flawed person, and I kind of grew up in a bit of a toxic environment, where I was pushed out is probably the kindest word to kind of say it, really. I was very unwelcome, and from the moment that they could, I was kind of out of that family once other children came along, really. So I was kind of the spare part, and experienced sort of parts of my childhood were quite traumatic, and not very nice, really. And so, for me, growing up in Paulsgrove, although at the time it felt normal, it felt like I didn't know any better, really. And so I wouldn't have said that I was growing up any different to anyone else. And until maybe, the more recent years, have I only really started to unpick that and go, actually, that wasn't okay. Shouldn't have been treated like that. Shouldn't have been sleeping out on the streets as a young teenager. Shouldn't have been locked away or anything like that. So it's given myself permission really to sort of say that was not okay. It wasn't my fault. I am not to blame. I was a child. So whilst at the time I would have said, if you had asked me this question, say 5 years ago, I would have told you I felt quite privileged because I ate, I had a roof over my head, and I still feel quite privileged, but for different reasons now. Mostly for the work that I do and the family that I have. It was hard, really, to answer your question in a nutshell, and is the root of a lot of trauma, which I could talk about later, about why the parenting network exists, and what I felt later on when I experienced some mental health problems later on in life that are rooted to those early childhood experiences, and ultimately came up when I became a parent, and then led on to me creating something for dads and then for families.
Okay. Wow. I mean, thank you for actually sharing that much. So, with your permission, we'll dig in a bit more. So, you said when you were younger, it was hard. You said you got pushed out and you was living rough. For a lot of people out there, they would think, what's the point in carrying on? What made you carry on?
It's hard to answer that, really, other than the sense of, at that point, it's just survival. There were some points in my life later on where I did wonder that very thing. So in my early 20s, my life kind of fell apart. A relationship had broken up. I'd lost my accommodation. I was no fixed abode and homeless again. And I was almost kind of right back to in some of those early teen childhoods. And I did have those thoughts then about not suicidal thoughts, but kind of like, if anything was to happen to me, it wouldn't really create many ripples. Not many people would be that concerned. It wouldn't have an impact really in the world, and my life wouldn't matter. So there was a point in my life where I felt that way. In my younger times, it was just an instinct of survival, and at that time it was more just feelings of hopelessness. Really, is more what I was kind of feeling, and kind of I had no power at that point to really change my life. I think around that time, I'd only just really kind of started college, for instance, and I wasn't always homeless in that kind of thing, because what would happen is I would have to go back home, and even though I was a young person and a child, I had to apologise. I had to be the one that said that I was in the wrong in order to be able to go back home and have that space. But in those periods where I couldn't do that, or the door just wouldn't open, I would just walk around in the evening, at night, all the way, and then go to college the next day, as if nothing had happened, cleaning up in college bathrooms and things, and making use of the canteen, and staying there till basically caretaker people kind of said, off you go, and if I was lucky, I'd stay around a mate's house or something. But yeah, so was dealing with that and hiding that as well from a lot of people. So kind of created a bit of a personality at college, really, of a happy-go-lucky kind of fun-loving kind of person, when really, actually, things weren't so great, really. But I didn't really realise that I was doing that, I suppose. And there was this kind of need to want and find love and connection as well, and sort of find people, because it was quite void, really, and materialistic before that. So yeah, that was kind of that experience for me, really. And it's difficult to explain, really. It wasn't thoughts, it was emotions, and it's just something that I went through, and I suppose there was an instinct of fight or flight and resilience there that kind of said, you've got to get through this, but no one questioned anything. And I remember, so most of this happened around, although I was Paulsgrove, I went to college in Fareham, so I ended up sort of sleeping on a bench one night in Fareham, in the precinct there near the bus station, and people would just assume that I'd missed the bus home or something, but no one said, hang on a minute, why is this 16, 17-year-old here, 4 a.m, and so nobody really, there wasn't any intervention or anything. I was very much alone in it. No people at college picked up on anything. I didn't say anything either. But I was in a very unstable environment, really, where I had to kind of be careful what I said, what I did, because the result was you'd at best you'd be pushed out and you'd have to stay away for a few days, and then you'd have to sort of be in the wrong in order to get back in. But much younger than that, I quickly learnt that in that household there were a lot of arguments and things, but it was when those arguments, so I'd be upstairs hiding away, and when it went quiet, that's when you knew the trouble was going to happen. That's when you were waiting to find out which person it was who was going to come in through the door and somehow make that argument your fault and all about you. And a bit of repressed memories here for you now. So I went through my life remembering that I used to litter my floor with Legos and cars and things, and in my head, I was remembering it as I was creating booby traps for monsters outside. I think I told myself that it was giants and vampires, something like that. In my adult life, I actually realised that it was the people inside that I was trying to stop coming into my room.
Wow. I must ask, I'll get to where the turning point was, but today, do you have a relationship with your mum?
Yes. Yeah. So when I became a parent, when I was by the age of 30, because for many years before that, there would be 5 years or so, 10 years or so of very little contact, hardly any, maybe once a year, and it would normally be, at Christmas time or something like that. When my children arrived, I thought that might be a time where bridges could mend and maybe I could get a little bit of that family. But it didn't quite work out like that, really. it wasn't the kind of healthy, positive relationship that I wanted them to have with my children. Obviously, I still don't know my birth dad. And I think it improved a little bit, particularly when it was just my daughter before my son was born. There were a few moments where they showed some interest in my daughter and took her out places. I think on one occasion she had a sleepover at theirs and things. So there were some signs early on that it was going to be nice. But that didn't last. And by the time, 5 years later, by the time my son was born, we were back to just a couple of times a year, the odd couple of phone calls. And it was just very materialistic with my children. They didn't want to spend time with them or anything. They would just kind of put money in their bank accounts and things. And so we were kind of just on the peripherals, really. Meanwhile, they were playing happy families, but not with mine. So for when my children were born, as far as I was kind of concerned, really, it was ground zero. I was starting again, creating the new foundations of the family, and wanted to be a positive parent for my children and tell them every day that I love them. I was 30 before I heard my mum say the words "I love you," and I had to say it first. I can't remember the occasion or why that was now, but I remember that. And it's quite sad, really, that partners and girlfriends said that to me before any blood relative, really. But yeah, so I do speak to my mum. It's soured a little bit at the moment because my stepfather died recently in November on Remembrance Sunday. There is, I have to be careful what I say because there's a coroner's report and nothing is certain yet, but there is strong suggestion that he took his own life. He was very unwell, very troubled, dealing with mental health problems, leukemia and alcoholism, and lived a very unhealthy lifestyle, stubborn to the end. And there's signs that he had made plans and things, but with him passing, I was able to open up to my family a bit more and say, I can't grieve in the same way that you are. Whilst he was a great person for you, he wasn't that for me. And bad people can be good and do good things, just like good people can do bad things. We're all human and capable of lots of being different things to different people. And I think me being honest about that and saying I was pushed away, and some of my family members saying I wasn't blind to that, which hurt as well, because I'm thinking, well, why didn't you intervene? So what I'm also dealing with now is I'm coming to terms with those that enabled that behaviour. The fact that I'm dealing with a grieving family as well, and a family who are now processing the fact that I'm being open and honest about what happened and what my reality was growing up, and that's kind of held a mirror up to some people who may not have acknowledged that they either turned a blind eye to things or were complicit. And so a lot of people are having to process and deal at the moment. So it's a bit awkward, but the future will tell where we go with that, really.
I heard of something once where they say death brings out the true character of people, and that happened in my life when I was 16. I lost my dad when I was 16, so that happened in my life too. So I understand in that respect. Okay, so again, thank you for sharing that. So you still have a relationship with your mother. You said in your early 20s, so you're going through this in your late teens, you're in college, sleeping rough. Your early 20s, you said, it all kind of came on top in a way. Could I say that?
Yeah.
Or?
So I kind of, by chance, so I kind of, my reaction to a lot of what happened in my early teens meant that I thought I was having a great time, but I kind of fell into the kind of a little bit of sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of lifestyle. Really, I was working sort of around Portsmouth as a bit of a promoter, putting on nights and things, getting DJs together, bands, working a lot of the student scene, the alternative scene, that kind of thing, battle of the bands, things like that, and living a great life, but actually quite unhealthily so. And I sort of indulged in a lot of risky behaviours. Made wrong choices. Few incidents where I'm probably lucky to be alive, to be honest. Lots of stories that you could kind of sit and tell somebody one night, but a bit like the scene in Jaws where they're swapping scar stories. I could definitely match people. So I kind of was doing that, and then I kind of fell into youth work, actually. And it was great. So what happened was I was on a bus, and on the bus I happened to bump into somebody I knew who said that they were now working in the youth service for our old youth worker when we were kids. And what the youth service had been for me and professionals like that, they had become the appropriate adults. The idea of what a healthy, positive role model could be. And they said they were recruiting, so I ended up working for the youth service in Havant, in sort of some of the hotspots there. And I did that for a couple of years. It was really good. Really enjoyed it. During that time, I met somebody as well, and life seemed pretty good. So I had this vibrant community down here in Portsmouth, and a lovely girlfriend, and also her family really adopted me and took me in. And I saw for the first time what a healthy family was. And her dad was fantastic. Really kind of took me under his wing. And I felt like I had found belonging. But what happened was Connections came along, and Connections was an organisation initially as a bit of an alternative to the youth service, and it took a lot of funding away from the youth service, and I found myself with my hours cut, and so all of a sudden I was barely getting by. Ended up losing my flat, had to move in with my partner and her family. There's kind of a little bit of an annexy thing there, so we weren't like in with them as much. Looking back, I probably was in a bit of a rut, depressed a little bit, not really able to, we were still quite young as well, not really able to do some of the life experiences and build the memories that a young couple might want to do. I just wasn't a great partner, to be honest, and inevitably kind of messed that up. And she ended it probably quite rightly, to be honest. But what that did do is that then took away the stability, and I found myself again without a home. The only option being to try to go back to my family as a last resort. I immediately found myself in the same situation again of being a burden. It wasn't a place that was like, this is always your home. You come back. It was very much kind of like, do you really have to be here? Have you not got anywhere else to go? So I was always feeling unwanted, not belonging. So actually I found myself once again just staying with other people, walking the streets, doing whatever I could not to be there. And it was really bad because so I was no fixed abode. I wasn't earning enough to really kind of get myself back on my feet. I'd lost somebody who I really, really loved, and a family that I really, really loved and connected with as well. So I felt like absolutely worthless at that point, and my mental health spiraled. And that's the period when I was saying earlier on about where I felt it doesn't really matter if I'm not here. If I got hit, God forbid, by a bus, and sorry for listeners if that's triggering, or if anything happened to me, nobody would really care. And I started, walking through streets at night, and not the sort of behaviours that I was kind of beginning to do was kind of walking through big groups of men who were obviously wrong-uns, I suppose would be a label you could do, almost kind of provoking that kind of a response and things. So I found myself, put myself in quite dangerous situations. I found myself kind of around characters that very unsavoury and not always on the right side of legality. And I found myself kind of getting involved with drugs for a little while, drinking heavily, getting involved with people that I shouldn't. And what I haven't really explained properly throughout all of this as well is I kind of yo-yoed throughout my life with addiction to sex and love. So I found myself in very unhealthy short-term relationships, quite often with multiple people, engaging in all sorts of behaviours, addicted to porn, all sorts of things like that, and also loving. So that trying to find that love. And in my early life, in my teenage life, whenever I had a girlfriend, it wasn't like love bombing, but I would love strong and overpoweringly so. And in my adult life now, I know that actually what that's doing, that's me searching for that connection and loving and just trying to feel that because it was devoid from me elsewhere. And inevitably that was too much for those people. So I was mentally unhealthy in a sense that I wasn't looking after myself. I wasn't doing anything to get myself out of that rut. I was feeling sorry for myself. I was depressed. I wasn't going to harm myself in the typical sense, but what I was doing, I was punishing myself, and I was in scenarios that I should not have been in, with people that I shouldn't have been in. And there was one instance where I was trying to pick myself up a little bit, and I found myself imprisoned with drug dealers because an associate owed them money. So it was rocky. And I suppose a turning point came when in 2004 I had a housing application, well, not housing application, but an accommodation referral to a homeless hostel in Fareham in 2004. At the same time, I had a job application into that homeless hostel as well. So I was kind of at a crossroads, and my life was either going to go one way or the other. And I was very fortunate that I gained employment at that homeless hostel, full-time employment. And I wasn't immediately well in that point. I was still hiding a lot of behaviours. I was still drinking really heavily. I was not so much with the drugs, but I was still a little bit involved with the drugs. And I had some healthier friends around me at that point. So my life was starting to pick up, and I had hope again. And for the first 6 months, it was fantastic, and I was healing. It was so good. But what happened was, what I didn't realise was the manager of that homeless hostel was only temporary and covering a sickness. And the next manager that came along was not a nice person and was really abusive. Not just to me, but to a lot of people. So I found myself subject to quite harsh workplace bullying. And I think quite often abusive people can sense vulnerabilities in people. And I think that's what happened there. I think although there had been no discussion and I wasn't talking about anything, I think he could sense that, I was vulnerable and susceptible and a little bit naive still as well. And I'm going to say it, desperate for a job. Because I knew that I couldn't go back. So I had to endure what he threw at me. Because I just couldn't lose it. I had to grit my teeth and stick with it and keep that employment because I needed that money. I needed to graft. I couldn't, it as bad as it was, I had to kind of see it through. And I did. I stuck with that for many years. Eventually, I think there were enough complaints from other people who did stood up, and I think he left before he was pushed, really. And I kind of wish now, I'm a different person now, and I kind of wish now that I could tell him to do one, basically, without trying to swear on the cameras, because I'd punch him square in the face these days. I won't back down from anyone. Now I'm a much stronger person, much more resilient because of those kind of experiences. But what that did do is, working in that environment, I really kind of cut my teeth, really, and I learned about people, and I learned about society, and I learned about all the kind of crises that vulnerable people were experiencing. And it was a really rewarding job as well. I loved doing it. And whilst doing that, not through that, but whilst I was doing that, I met my partner Rachel, who we've now started a family together, and we've been together nearly 20 years. And we've got 2 children. So whilst those first few years were really hard working in the hostel, it's kind of set me on the path, really, of where I am today. And I worked in those kind of in the youth hostels and the homeless hostels and all those kind of things for many years before coming here to Portsmouth, and was working in a place called the Portsmouth Foyer, which at that time housed 150 young people all under one roof, and it was chaos, but some of the best years of my life. And so my career in the third sector was starting to really kind of go strong, and I experienced so many things working in some of those hostels, from people attempting suicide, from assaults, from people setting fires, floods, even having printing money in their wardrobes, Scottish notes and things. I've experienced so much through that, and it's fantastic, and it was so rewarding. What I did develop there was my professional practice as well. Working restoratively, working relationally, working humanly. Not transactionally, and making sure that every person counts, and that whilst kind of there was this kind of barrier, this professional barrier, it doesn't have to be so transactional. We can treat people as humans. It doesn't have to be an us and you kind of thing, as it were, but still managing those boundaries. And I learned all of that and became really, really good at the support work, the project work, and just really excelled and spread through all of that, really. And I always thought that I would go on and that would be my life, really. My career would be to go into management in those things, really. But when I became a dad, that all changed, really. The plan changed.
And how did it change?
So by that point, I feel like I've healed. I feel like I've got my life together. I feel like I've got a partner, dual income. It means that my accommodation is more sort of stable. I can stand on my own feet. I feel like I've kind of arrived. I've grown up. I'm secure. Everything I never could. No more scraping the barrels. No more having to go around pubs asking if I can clean up in the mornings or anything like that. No more sleeping on benches or anything like that. My life has come together. I'm good at my job. I've endured the workplace bullying. I've come to a healthy environment. The Portsmouth foyer was a lovely place to work with lovely employers. And I was doing good. It was rewarding. All these young people I was caseloading, we were having I was having really good outcomes. Some of them have come on to become Olympians. Some of them are training horses in Norway. Teachers, parents, just good people. So it was lovely. And then at the age of 30, 2011, I became a dad. Planned. And when Evelyn, my daughter, was born, the pregnancy was fantastic. My partner was glowing. She had a lovely first pregnancy. When Evelyn was born, she didn't have a good time. Looking back now, I would say it was postnatal depression, and also breastfeeding didn't go to plan, and that really hit Rachel hard. She felt like she couldn't do the job that, as Mother Nature intended, that she wanted to do. And she tried so hard, and midwives were tried, and it just wasn't happening, and she was getting really sore. And when I was voicing my concerns about postnatal depression to healthcare professionals, I wasn't getting listened to. And at no point did any professional ask me as their dad how I was doing. Not once. But what I was experiencing was that I was having to take on a lot with my new daughter, and I was having to look after my partner, and a lot of repressed memories of rejection and abandonment and neglect came flooding to the surface. So everything before that point, I hadn't really connected to my childhood. It was at this point that I was starting to say, okay, that wasn't how things should be. And when I'm holding my daughter in my arms at 3 a.m, I'm making promises to her to be the parent that I didn't have, and asking questions like, how could anybody not want to be in your life? This is about my birth father now. Why would you just Not why would you just disappear? Why, how, because I could not at that point imagine walking away from my child. And I stopped drinking at that point as well. Since then, I could probably count the amount of times that I've had drinks in one hand, really. I was never going to be in a point of her life where I was drunk and unable to be there for her if she needed me. So I started to change my lifestyle and me, and I was struggling internally with those feelings of rejection, abandonment, and neglect, like I said, and all those feelings of unwantedness came flooding back. And for a time, I just channeled that into being the best dad that I could be for her, and the best partner, but mostly for my child. And I took it so seriously. I was downloading all the apps, reading all the books, doing everything I possibly could to provide and make sure that my daughter grew up in an environment where she knew she was safe and loved. And I told her every day, and I would do everything I possibly could to nurture that and make it a positive childhood for her. And that's all. It was just a personal thing. There was no concept of doing anything for anyone else at that point. What I did kind of do is there wasn't really anyone in my social circle. Most of my friends were girls, but they were all really young, quite a bit younger than me, at least 5 years younger than me, and so families and things weren't on the radar. So I kind of drifted a little bit as well. So I started to be a bit isolated as a parent, and I felt that. And I was also aware that there weren't any services for dads. And so there's 5 years between my daughter and my son. And so I continued feeling, just championing my daughter, being there for her, being the best dad I could be, working in the third sector. And then by the time my son was born, I was starting to talk about services for dads, and I noticed nothing had changed in those 5 years. It was still pretty crap. Nothing was out there. And I was talking to a couple of other people, and someone suggested that I should maybe create a Facebook page. Didn't for a while. Took me about 6 months because I was a procrastinator, a wantrepreneur at that point, really. One day, Rodney, we're going to be millionaires type situation. But one day, I don't know what caused it, but I did create that group on Facebook. Dadzclub with a Z. And it took off massively. And it changed everything. It changed my life forever. To what started this journey of Dadzclub and the parenting network.
Wow. Okay, before we go into Dadzclub and parenting network, postnatal depression, obviously it's a real thing. But what did you experience, if you can go in detail? Like, what telltale signs did you see from your partner so other men and people watching or listening can actually understand?
So, because I've not really had her permission to really go into the details, so I'll talk as much as I can. But yeah, she just, because she couldn't behave, she couldn't feed the way that she wanted to. She's always struggled with waking up at nights and sleep and that kind of thing. And she just really withdrew within herself. We'd gone from this vibrant mum, just literally glowing, to a shadow of herself, and she would cry and she would talk about, because it was such, she'd built up this image of what it was going to be like, and the reality hadn't turned out that way. And social influencers have got a lot to answer in this, in the fairy tale image of what parenting looks like. And when the reality was there and it was difficult and it was hard, she dived. She found that really difficult, and I wouldn't say she gave up, because she still tried. Every day she tried, but she struggled, and she couldn't always succeed. And I had to shoulder a lot of that, and I had to be her coach, I had to be her counsellor, I had to be her partner, her support worker, everything, to try and help her through that. It didn't last long, but it was there, and it just meant that I had, when she felt she couldn't do the feeds and so on, it fell to me. It wasn't a bleak picture like I make it out to be. There were beautiful moments. We did everything together. She enjoyed parenthood. It wasn't like psychosis or anything like that. She wasn't talking about harming herself or harming the baby, or having any kind of delusional thoughts or hallucinations. So it wasn't postpartum psychosis, but she was depressed, and I would say moderately depressed. Feeling useless, worthless, like she'd failed, but she wasn't failing, not at all, not in the slightest. She just needed help and support, and we ended up having to do that between ourselves, because it didn't come from the midwives and the health visitors.
No,
but it just didn't. It wasn't enough, really. So yeah, but we got through that, and we had those wonderful moments of bathing our baby together and those kind of things, and changing nappies, and we had those shared moments of projectile poo going across the nursery and stuff like that, and being able to walk around with our baby. And she enjoyed those moments of walking around with a new baby and those looks she'd get from little old ladies and things and stuff. So it wasn't, for her, it wasn't always this bleak picture, but there was depression there, that immense feeling of I failed, and it took her a while to realise that she hadn't. Beautifully, though, what did happen, and I think what kind of brought it full circle, was although with our son, she had a horrible pregnancy, she was ill, and smells and scents would just make her sick. Slightest smells, I had to spend 9 months with no deodorant, because it would make her want to be sick. But when he arrived, immediately latched on. So all of a sudden, I think in there as well, because I'm sure she must have been fearing that she was going to go through that again. But it was beautiful straight away, latched on. So it was really nice to for that to happen. It's not been quite plain sailing with Miles. He's got some neurodivergency there that we're exploring. It's pretty much universally agreed that it's autism, but we haven't had that properly diagnosed yet. But we're getting beautiful support from the school. But we've got lovely kids, really. So she's doing an excellent job. Well, we're doing an excellent job, really.
That's good. It seems full circle. You want in that family, and now you finally found that love. You finally found that family unit, if you will.
Yeah.
Wholesome. So cool. We have just founded Dadzclub with a Z.
Dadzclub with a Z. Yeah, so at that point it wasn't anything other than a Facebook group.
Okay.
Really. And what happened, as with a lot of things in parenting, the mums discovered it and kind of pushed the dads, really, and they joined it. And that kind of said, there's something in this, really. And for a while, it was a Facebook group and a bit of a chit chat sort of thing, sharing stories, bit of a 3 a.m. feeding club, on the messenger. Who's awake? I'm feeding the baby, that kind of thing. So there was that kind of support and camaraderie there. And that kind of grew to ad hoc coffee meets. It was very intimate. At most you get maybe 3 other dads show up, but it was nice. And kind of the ideas were there. It's kind of like, so Matt, what's the future of this going to be? Is this going to happen more? Is it going to become more structured? And obviously I was working at that point. I wasn't making a living from this. There was no funding or money or anything from it. But I felt that responsibility then, really, and started to kind of ask myself, could I? Would it work? Is this viable? Who would want to fund a group for dads? Surely not. And what happened was I started to become a bit of the token dad, really, for local authorities. So they could say they had worked with dads. So I'd get invited to things, really. A local support service kind of picked me up a little bit, and I kind of volunteered with them for a little bit. But when I then told them that I wanted to create a actual support service for dads, they quickly cast me aside and said that actually it was really sexist to create a support service for dads, and that I was putting dads on a pedestal, and in some way saying that they were more entitled than the mums. And they actually said, we talk around the office quite often and we don't think that dads can be as capable parents as mums. And this was coming from a local support service in Portsmouth that was part of a national charity, who I had gone to looking for advice and support and backing and endorsement to create this group. So I went away from that really despondent, really sad, but actually thinking, well, F you, I'm going to do it, and I'm not just going to do it, I'm going to make it the best one. And so I started talking to the local authority, and I was really, really lucky that at that time a lady called Kate, who was the head of early help and intervention within the Portsmouth City Council, she saw value in this group and helped me find a little bit of money within the council to kind of do a pilot year. And so what happened was Dadzclub became my job. Didn't know if it was going to be anything more than just a nice year just to do that, really. But I was determined to make something of it, and we ended up working within the family hubs, doing physical groups, stay and play groups for dads, that kind of thing. Monthly meetups just for the dads, like coffee meets, curry nights, all those kind of things. It was fantastic. And it kind of started, the initial things we started doing were things like we done like Lego days with the dads and the kids and all kinds of things like that. It was fantastic. It was really good. And the dads were coming. It wasn't really hard to make it work. And because we were commissioned by the council, they wanted us to do it kind of midweek kind of stuff, and it didn't really work for working dads. But it took me most of that year to convince them to let me into their family hubs at the weekends. The minute that they agreed that, and I opened up the family hubs at the weekend, we were getting 15, 20 dads through the door, and it became a movement, it became a community, and dads belonged. And once they walked through those doors, that was it. They were lifers. We've got dads now who have been with us for those 9 years. So it's fantastic. And so for that year, it was really, really great. But I was aware, obviously, that was limited. And so I needed to come up with an answer for how it would sustain, how it would continue. I didn't know at that time, actually, that Kate was prepared to fund it for another year beyond that. But not knowing that, I went out and found lottery funding. And it was really great. So I worked with the lottery, and at that point, they were working on a philosophy of realising that they needed to engage with, I suppose, community leaders, if I allow myself to call me that, who may not necessarily be experienced in putting funding bids and things together. And they really held my hand and worked me through these things, and they saw value in what I did, and put the lottery funding in, and they actually came back, because I initially only put in for another year. Again, naivety, and really kind of kept the money low, because at that point I was thinking, well, if I ask for less, it's more likely to get accepted. They came back and said, actually, we want to triple the amount you're asking for, and we think that this should be over many years as well. So we ended up being a 3-year thing. And what evolved from all of that, I was encountering people that I'd worked with in the young homeless hostels who were now becoming parents. And all that was available, there was nothing available for the dads or the boys, but for the young mums, the teenage mums, there was the Family Nurse Partnership, which is a fantastic project, but they can only take a very small number of mums, and there's a very strict criteria. So there was nothing universal. And I kind of felt like there needed to be that universal service. So whilst going through funding for Dadzclub, I motioned the idea to the lottery, could I do this service as well? And that set us in motion then of, okay, well, we can't just be Dadzclub anymore. And so the beginnings of the parenting network came about. And so then also that gave me money to hire some staff. And so we became a team of 3, a Dadzclub worker, a young families worker, and myself. And my partner kind of did some ad hoc work and bits and pieces as well, which was really great because she'd been along this journey, you know. And so the beginnings of the parenting network started, really. We were in a very small office in the Guildhall, working in the family hubs, and so that for a number of years, that's all it was, really, a team of 3, 2 projects, until COVID. And then when COVID happened, everything changed again.
Jeez, and then from COVID it went from, well, those 3 projects to, how did it change? And yeah, to date, 5 years on.
So we, during COVID, obviously everyone will remember what that was like. It was a difficult time. For us, it was both the best thing that happened to us and the worst thing. So the worst thing being, all of a sudden, we can't do what we do, which was bringing groups of people together. Our funders were very understanding, and obviously no one knew at that time how long it was going to go on for. But they were very understanding and were like, look, if you need to just kind of pause, we understand, obviously, you've still got to, there's going to be some outgoings, but if you need to pause, that's okay with us. Let's go, just to know we're flexible. And it was great. And what that enabled us to do was to really audit our organisation in the early days. Really, we'd learned things along the way, and we started to realise where we could be more efficient with things, create some more savings, and that enabled us to start thinking about potentially maybe getting somebody in a few hours a week to write some funding bids and things. We weren't there at that point, but we were deciding that those are the kind of things we were going to do when we were past all this. What I also did, so we, and people won't really know this really, but before COVID, during the holiday hunger scandals when the vouchers weren't made available, along with another organisation called Lillian Lime, Chris Hillman, if you're watching this, thank you so much for those days. We were feeding, I think, between 50 and 80 young people a day in the youth centres during the whole Marcus Rashford holiday hunger thing. So we've been involved in a lot of big things that people just don't know about. And during the lockdown, we were distributing thousands of activity packs, foods and things as well. Not for thanks or anything. We've never been thanked for that. We did do it for that. But we were trying to do something at that point, and that's kind of what we did. We got some sort of bits made and distributed those. Gave a lot of it to the Hive, who then distributed stuff as well. But what was also happened before lockdown, we had experienced a couple of families who came to us in need, say one person in particular who had triplets, and basically said, look, I work, but I've just taken on sole responsibility for these triplets now. I don't have my partner with me, and I'm struggling to clothe them. Do you think amongst Dadzclub and the likes we could do a bit of an anonymous call out for some clothes? And we did that, and we were inundated with people dropping stuff off. So a cupboard became our kind of baby bank type thing, clothing bank. And at that point, it only really kind of served the people that we were already kind of working with within our groups. It wasn't a big project in itself. Lockdown happened, and I had this kind of eureka moment of a baby bank. That's what I'm going to do. Didn't know of any other projects around. I didn't find anything in my diligence. I found out there was a church that had a cupboard that were doing something similar at the time, and they weren't too best pleased that I started a baby bank, but it was totally coincidental. But so I put out a crowdfunder, and the head of crowdfunder got behind that as well and helped me, kind of coaching me on how to be successful with that. Got some local artists to create a Portsmouth COVID artwork and things that we were able to offer as rewards to people who funded it and stuff. People really got behind the idea of a baby bank, and we fundraised quite quickly about £5,000, which meant that I could repurpose a little meeting room that we had in the Guildhall and made a baby bank during lockdown. So Guildhall was deadly quiet. There was just myself in there creating this, and a man called Nick, who's like senior technician of the Guildhall, and he was kind of caretaking the building and things, watering the plants, keeping it safe. At that time, the lifts were out of action as well, and we're based on the third floor in the Guildhall, or were when we were there, and lockdown's there. And once I'd got all the shelving there and the infrastructure's there, and I designed a web page and a referral form and all the processes and things, I then put the call out, and they had the cafe in the Guildhall, not for the last time, became a bit of a base for us, and people were dropping stuff off, and we were taking up, and because there was no lift, just me on my own, I spent months carting tons of equipment and nappies and formulas and clothes and shelves and all sorts of bits and pieces up these 3 flights of stairs. Lost a bit of weight in that time. I've put it back on since, mind you. Parenting does that for you. But we got it there, and then that was really good. And so I kind of initially ran that, and at that time I said to myself, if we help 200 families a year, it will be worth it. We do that in a month now, really, through the baby bank. So it's been a tremendous success. So it came up, and then what happened was I was then able to, once the restrictions kind of lifted a little bit, my partner came on board and took over the baby bank, so I could then go back and do my role of heading up the parenting network. And she was able to grow on what I had started. So that was our kind of activities during lockdown. And coming out of lockdown, we were then able, as I said, to get a few hours for a fundraising manager. We also got an events person in who was creating these kind of enriching hands-on events programs once a month for families, getting kind of roaming museums and petting zoos in, and it's all about STEAM, sort of science and education and living history. We had kids with shields and swords, with pretending to be Saxon warriors and things. It was great, and we were really starting to emerge as an organisation, and very quickly. So since lockdown lifted, we went from, between then and now, we have grown from 3 members of staff with 2 projects and an office to, and I'll explain more of the journey later, but we're now a team of 30 paid staff, 50 if you include our students and volunteers. We have 3 venues. We're in 5 family hubs in this city. We're in Southampton and Isle of Wight. We've got the busiest baby bank outside of London. We've got the most successful boots on the ground physical service for dads. There's bigger online ones, but we're the ones that are doing the work on the ground. And we're launching pioneering services for people who have experienced childhood trauma. April's project, who was in one of your previous podcasts. And April is responsible for an awful lot, actually. And it's brought us to quite a good point, actually, to bring up a period within the parenting network where April came on board. So people will remember a little more than 3 years ago now, Putin's regime invaded Ukraine. So I, like everyone else, I was appalled and watching on the news and felt that I needed to do something. And I kind of said on my personal Facebook page that I was going to do something, and I wanted somebody with a van, and I was going to somehow fill this van, and we were going to go and take goods to Ukraine, and we were just going to make it work. Did that, and Mike Woods from Solent Sky Services, thank you, Mike, said, "I'm your man, I'm in, let's do it." And so that was literally within a week of the invasion starting, and nobody really knowing too much. Russia had gone right up to the streets of Kiev at that point, and news weren't really getting in there. People were fleeing, and we started sharing what we were going to do. And very quickly, I shared it with my team at the Parenting Network, and they said, "Okay, well, if we can help a little bit, we will, and we'll tell some of our circles, and we'll get some bits in as well." And so it was quite a small, intimate thing. Word got out, and I don't think a lot of people really knew that the Parenting Network was behind it, because it then almost became the city's response to the Ukraine. And I can't back this up with any kind of source. Others will be able to look and check me, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we inevitably did was probably the biggest peacetime humanitarian response that Portsmouth has ever done. I'm sure during World War II and the Falklands and things, there was much bigger responses. But in peacetime, I think what we ended up doing, because it went far beyond just a van and me and Mike. So what happened was all the schools started collecting, scout groups, families, everything, workplaces were bringing stuff to the guild hall, and we actually took over most of the guild hall, all of downstairs in the cafe, all of the third floor. It was just spilling out everywhere. Tim Peake even got involved. Came, done a little bit of an interview. He was touring at that time, so he made sure that on the screens during his shows it was flashing up saying donate to these guys. And yeah, we ended up going out to take that stuff out there. We raised a lot of money too. So once the vans were emptied, we then went to the cash and carries and filled up the vans again and repeated those trips. But what was happening is while we were there, Portsmouth was continuing to donate and filled the guild hall back up again. So we came back, and all of a sudden we needed another 7 drivers to get this stuff there. And there was a local plumber who was trying to mount stuff as well and do stuff. And so he got a fleet of people, and we filled them up and repeated again. And what also happened was we were getting support from the government and Stephen Morgan, and they were trying to get our special passes and things. We didn't need it in there because what happened is border control just went, sod it, you guys go. Good luck, stick it to Putin, you know. Beeping horns went past and things. And what happened was my team, thank you, my team, for all that involved in that time, they went beyond just we'll tell our circles. They became the central office. You know, they were figuring out the insurance for these vans and things and all that kind of stuff. And we were getting Ukrainians and Russians and Polish people all coming together. So whilst there may be this conflict, these people were working together for the common good. And we had this whole task force there. And April came and volunteered. She probably mentioned it in her story when she was in her podcast with you, and she had obviously had a journey up to that point that it was quite recent at that point when she came to volunteer with us. And yeah, and so she came on board and then talked about her Embrace idea. It wasn't called Embrace then, and shared her journey of childhood trauma. And I kind of said to her, well, let's make that happen. And so she brought her in for a few hours and a week, and a bit of kind of a research and development kind of thing. We said we'll give some of our budget to you to explore this and meet with council members and explore whether this can happen. And bit by bit, she's now become kind of like my right-hand person and partner in building the parenting network, and she is as much responsible for this since then as I am, really. She's brought into this whole project, and she's one of the most kindest people that I know, and people really warm to her and open up to her. And we have collaboratively built this big behemoth of an organisation that is probably the biggest and most influential third sector organisation that Portsmouth has. You know, we supported 12,000 families last year, and 140 to 200 families a month in the baby bank. You know, it's what we're doing here is incredible, and people just keep coming, and we're really aware of where we're sitting and the work in front of us and what's being asked of us and the need that families have got. But it's just really good to be able to have this chance to say to people, we haven't just popped up, as many people think. We get it all the time. Crikey, you guys are everywhere at the moment, but where did you come from? Well, we're actually 9 years old, and we've been supporting this city behind the scenes for a long time. Whether it's holiday hunger, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's COVID, you know, we've been involved in some big things in this city. And it has only been recently, really, that we've kind of been discovered, really. But we've been here, and now it's really good, particularly in the face of that organisation, for instance, that snubbed me in the beginning and accused me of being a sexist organisation, because obviously we're not now. Obviously we've got young mums projects, we've got school readiness projects, we've got bump and baby projects, we've got the baby bank, we've obviously got the Dadzclub project. There's so many things that we've got that kind of say, well, actually, no, you're not right there. And whilst that organisation has a much larger budget than ours, we've actually achieved 10 times the amount of families that they have. So our outcomes and our way of working speaks volumes. And we're really proud to say that we are the people's choice for family support in Portsmouth. And we're meeting families now who are in such dire need, because we're still seeing the echoes of COVID. We've got families who had COVID babies are now having more children, and that's bringing up experiences and memories and trauma from then. The cost of living. We're in a much more unaccepting society now. We're more polarised, more divided than ever. Whereby I do feel like people have pulled away a lot more, and that may be because of the way cost of living and things have gone, and Brexit's got a lot to answer for, and people are becoming much more vocal on social media, and I think it's got a lot to answer for. And instead of finding commonality and binding together, we're allowing the minority and to divide us a lot more, and it's really sad to see. But at the Parenting Network, we've been really successful in breaking down those barriers, and we've got a really diverse range of families that come to us from all backgrounds, all ethnic minorities, all economical. It doesn't matter whether it's dual income families, single parent families, African families, gay families. It really does not matter. What we're building here is just a safe, welcoming space where people can come and connect. We have developed a community whereby we are part of people's village in their parenting journey. People will come to us if they receive a difficult letter, if they've got something difficult in their lives, something challenging. I'll go down to the Parenting Network, I'll have a coffee with Hannah or Terry, and I'll talk about things. And that's what we've created in the Bridge Centre in Fratton, is this safe space, our own family hub, which is busy, it's vibrant, it's lovely, it's welcoming, it's accepting of everybody. Everyone is welcome. And it's a wonderful project. And we've obviously got the baby bank next door now, and being there with those two sites has made us so accessible and so in the community, because what we have here is we're in between two cohorts, Charles Dickens and Fratton. Now, most people watching won't understand this, but there's something called the Indices Report. And in that report, it lists Fratton and Charles Dickens as being in the top 10% of impoverished areas in the country. And putting that into perspective, what that means is 1,000 boroughs, really. So the top 10% is 1,000 boroughs in this country. Now you can imagine there's a lot of wards, a lot of boroughs in this country. Probably, I don't know, maybe 100,000, who knows? But in that top 1,000, we've got several in this city that are in that. 40% of Portsmouth children are living in abject poverty. The average reading age for an adult in Portsmouth is 12. Our statistics for teen pregnancies, whilst they have risen, are still well below what they should be, particularly in the southeast. We stick out like a sore thumb for statistics here in the southeast. And I quite describe us as a northern town in the south, to be honest. So we've arrived at the right time, in the right place, when people need us. And they're coming in the hundreds. And we can't, to be honest, we're struggling. We're meeting that demand. We're meeting that demand. We've got a team of professionals who work really hard with passion to support those families. But we're doing that with little financial support from the local authority or commissioning boards. We have to go out and get our funding from things like the lottery, Children in Need. Thank you to all those funders that do that. But we've also started to work with local businesses. And we've been so lucky to work with organisations such as Mountjoy, Westwood Projects, Citrus Facilities. There's absolutely loads and loads of organisations that are seeing the value and realising the problem and coming to meet us and seeing the work that we're doing and saying, I need to get behind that. I need to do something here. Because I employ families, or I've got a family, or I just want to do something good. And I can, with us, they can see the work, they can see the tangible outcomes. If they help the baby bank, they know that that's going to be buggies for families, that's going to be formula for babies, it's going to be stair gates, it's going to be clothes, or it could be keeping the lights on in some of our venues that we have. We don't get any kind of discounts or anything. We're literally paying to deliver the services that we do, which is just laughable, really, because you think we would get it for free, but we don't. So we've got 3 venues here in Portsmouth. We've obviously got the hub in the Bridge Centre, we've got the baby bank, and we've got this amazing space here, the Forge, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. But we're so lucky to be able to be in a position to help the people that we're helping, and the people that are coming to us for help. The stories that come with that are really, really troubling, and they're coming to us so desperate, so lost, not knowing where to turn. There's no one demographic. We'll see people who are working, we'll see teachers, we'll see nurses come into the baby bank. Nobody is immune from needing support, needing help, or just needing connection. And that's what we're getting at. And we have, for instance, we'll have mums fleeing domestic abuse, and they'll be moved out of area from somewhere else, let's say for argument's sake, Aldershot. And what tends to happen is they'll be moved to this area, and the referral will take place. So there'll be a referral from that service to the other service, and housing will be sorted. But then that mum will be housed there, and quite often it doesn't immediately get picked up by the Portsmouth services. And also they suddenly find themselves in a house with nothing, no goods, no idea of where the shops are. Alone, isolated, still fearful that they're going to be found by partner. And then they do a Google search, or they find the Asda and they walk through and they see us and they knock on that door. We open the door and they'll say, I think I need to talk. And then the floods of tears come out, and we immediately bring them in. And so we're then quickly, we're going to Asda, we're getting them some immediate 24-hour supplies of the shopping. We're doing an assessment of their housing. Okay, have you got budgets? Where's your money coming from? We're rallying around them, and we'll get them settled for that 24 hours, and we'll say, right, okay, come and see us again tomorrow. We're going to make some phone calls together. We're going to phone housing options. We're going to phone the agency that should be picking you up and try to get a name for the person that come and see you and find out where that is, and we're going to be there until that person does. And And then that family come back to us. They come to our groups and so on. We get dads who come to us, who have been given parental responsibility all of a sudden, and they're lost and they don't know what to do. They've never had that responsibility, and all of a sudden Dadzclub wraps around them. We get families who have lost partners have unfortunately passed or suicide. We get families who have lost one of their children, so we get a lot of that. We get obviously baby bank referrals where families have just lost everything. There's so many different stories we could tell you. People coming to us who have been experienced postpartum psychosis and experiencing severe mental health, and we become the only place that they will go, their only safe space outside of their home. We've got a video on our Vimeo and on our YouTube channels of that lady talking about that experience, and then we've also got a man who has to have an assistance dog, and one of our men's projects is the only place that he feels he can come to without his dog, and it's the only place that he feels like he was before he experienced his trauma, and he can be who he was before. Those are everyday reminders. They're not unique. There's hundreds of those people, but they are daily reminders of why we're doing what we're doing, why we need to make it work, why people need to get behind us, really. Because we're doing the work that other organisations either are failing to do, are too stretched out to be able to achieve everything that they're doing. And we're getting other organisations who are supposed to support these families. They're now turning to us and saying, as the leading professionals now, saying, what do we do in this situation? Can you advise on this? So we're doing the work and not getting the sort of backing that we should be, really. So there is a message in this video there, really, to commissioners and local authorities out there to kind of look to where their eyes are and where they're putting their resources. And, there might be some ill-advised projects that are costing hundreds of thousands of pounds for very little outcome, and that could be better spent.
That's fair game. That is fair game. Yeah, I remember talking to the leader of the council, and they were talking about tertiary or third sector organisations and what is statutory, and the fact that if more money was put into certain third sector organisations, a lot of the issues that they're treating in statutory provisions wouldn't need to be funded, because they would all be sorted by the things that work.
Very much so.
And yeah, I think that's the issue with a lot of things right now. So that's the parenting network. So that brings us kind of to the current day. So where are we today, and where do you envision? Because I feel like it seems you started it to obviously address a need with dads, and it kind of blossomed into this other thing when other things sort of brought and pulled you towards them. So where do you envision it?
So I don't think ambition needs to be a dirty word, but we're very ambitious here in the Parenting Network, mostly because we know what we're doing is working, we know that it's needed, and we know that it can be replicated, but we also know that very few people can do what we do. So right now we're opening this place here, the Forge on Fratton Road. This is our adult support hub. It's looking at adult mental well-being. Whilst we we'll have mental health professionals here from time to time. It's important to say that we are not mental health professionals. We have had more than your usual mental health training. I myself have had, for instance, prenatal mental health training for fathers, and I deliver that training to professionals and things. Many of our staff will have mental health first aid and things. So what we have built here isn't a mental health hub, but it is a support hub, and it is a place for adults to come, not just dads, as many people might think because of my background with Dadzclub, but it's create that same ethos that we've got in the Bridge Hub of being a warm, welcoming space where you can come. There will be triage services during the day, drop-in services where you could go to our website. It's not currently open at the moment because we've not yet launched the Forge, but when it does, there'll be a Forge page and people will be able to go on there and they'll be able to come and meet. We're hoping to get a community engagement worker in here for that, so we can triage people in the same way that Hannah over in the Bridge Hub triages families. We can do some more stuff here that's more adult centric here, so we can provide some of that, and then in the evenings we will have some more of our targeted work. So we've already got our peer group for dads going on in here. Next week we have our group for armed forces and veterans. So that will be on a Tuesday evening in here from the 17th. We're really excited to be launching that. We'll have 2 Embrace projects going on in this service. So what happened was initially our childhood trauma project was supposed to be for 16 to 25-year-olds. But what we then found was there were younger people that needed that service. So we lowered that age quite quickly. But whilst we then advertised that service was coming, we were getting contacted, or rather April was getting contacted by many people over the age of 25 saying, hang on a minute, I'm 37 or I'm 46 or whatever, and I need this service. I've got kids and I need this service, you know? So we were able to get funding and create that group as well. So we're now going to have an afternoon group for under 25s. And then we're going to have this universal group in the evenings as well for those people. So that's going to be taking place in here. There's other organisations who I'm talking to about using this sort of space as well, such as the Special Guardianship Group, which are for family members who have adopted young children from their family. So instead of going to other families outside of that family unit, sometimes maybe aunt or nan or something, or granddad or whoever might be the appropriate person to do that, but they need support. So groups like that are going to take place in here. We've got monthly networking that goes in here with the business community as well, which raises some funds to help keep some of the lights on. It's minimal, but it helps a little bit just to keep the lights on. This is going to become quite an important space, an adult space, a safe space, and it's deliberately rustic, as you may have noticed. And the idea for that is unashamedly, it's almost kind of to bring the men in. So it's a little bit of a man cave. You'll notice we've got a coffee machine, we've got a pool table, and the idea basically is that we've got this den here that we can... The concept of going down the pub with your mates to have a chat is nothing new. Playing some pool, we talk a little bit as men whilst we're doing stuff. Quite often we'll free up. So if we're playing pool, or we're just happened, if you know, in our younger days, passing a ball between us or something like that, you know, going down the pub can be a bit of a thing. But as we know, alcohol's not always the best ingredients if you're dealing with some difficult emotions. It's not the best ingredient for a lot of people. So what we've done here is we've created a more healthier space for that. We're also aware that some support groups out there, particularly for men, are led by people who haven't quite got themselves into a space where they have done the work on themselves and they are in a space to look after other people. we're aware of some groups that aren't quite safe. So what we've done is we've created a space where there is that supervision, there is that safeguarding in place, there are some professionals here, and it is a place that you can come to find safety and nurturing. So what this place is, this is more than just wood, it's more than just a corrugated iron, it's more than just the lanterns and the festoon lighting that you see and the really cool seating and the barrels. What this place is the whispers, it's the tears, it's the conversations, the joy, the sadness, the emotions that will take place in here. This is what this place is. And it's the conversations that are going to go over these barrels, the coffees that we have, the conversations that are going to go over on the pool table there. So, and when people come in, and we have a coffee machine here, and people can donate, it's a coffee by donation kind of arrangement. What you're doing there is you're facilitating a conversation that can take place, and that's why this space is so important. And I'm really proud of what it's hopefully going to become. But we're not stopping there. So whilst we have this space and we're excited to see how this develops, we are also currently about to expand our presence on the Isle of Wight, potentially opening up a space there. What we will be doing is we'll be expanding our current Dadzclub provision on the island to create a parental inclusion team. And that team will be working within the communities of marginalised sectors of parents, of which dads are, also young mums are, military families are, disabled families are, fostering parents are, LGBTQ communities, the list is endless, global majority families. So it's a bit of a new venture on the island, really, in terms of, whilst we do that work here in Portsmouth, what we're doing is we're taking what we know and we're putting that into a team, and we're putting it outside of Portsmouth, and that team will be the team on the island dealing with that for a couple of years as the pilot project. Hopefully it will then go on to be fully commissioned long term on the island, and we will have a centre just like in the bridge hub that we've got, where families can go and they can do the baby massage, they can do our sensory play and our stay and play groups, and we'll have our dad's group there and our peer support groups in the evening. So we'll have all that going on there, whilst we've also got all this outreach work going on with the marginalised sectors. So we'll be developing that over the year. But what we're also doing, we'll maintain our dad's group in Southampton, and we're going to expand that, and we hope to eventually replicate what we've done on the Isle of Wight in Southampton. But we're also, over the next few years, we're going to become a federated charity. And what that means is, so some of your big organisations like Bernardo's, Homestart, for instance, they have various branches around the country, and essentially that's a franchise. So becoming a federated charity means that we can create TPN Isle of Wight, TPN Brighton, TPN Bristol, TPN Leeds, and they become their own charities in their own right, but they're linked to the central charity. So when I said ambitious, our vision is to spread out our wings, really, at a realistic pace. That means that we're not stretching too far, but we know we're bloody good at what we do, and we're helping tens of thousands of people. And if we can spread that, if we can get the right backing, if we can get the right funding, because we're already doing so good on a fraction of the budget of our like-for-like organisations, then just think what we could do in that kind of scenario, the good that we can do.
I guess watch this space.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. So, Matt, thank you for sharing. That was That was special. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was really informative, and also it's very emotional. It took me there as well. And again, thank you for sharing. I'm excited to see all the plans come into fruition and see what the future holds.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I've really enjoyed the chance, really, to share a little bit of my journey. There's some bits there that I haven't said before, bit of an exclusive, and to answer that question, where did we come from? Now you know, really.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I guess we'll put a pin in it there, and we'll see how far this goes. And I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Nice. All right, so Matt, welcome to part 2. And part 2 is where we go out into the public and we ask a question about some of the topic that we spoke about today. Really, it's blind, so you don't have any clue what is about to happen. And so how it works is I'm going to play you it back. If you want to pause it, you're free to. If not, you can watch it all the way through. It's about 2-3 minutes long.
Okay.
And yeah, let's crack on.
Well, I wonder what we're going to hear. Okay.
Do you think there's enough done for single dads?
No, I don't think I've ever heard of single dads groups. No, probably not. No.
Interesting. Do you think there could be more done?
Yeah. Could be, yeah. I'd say so.
Do you think there's enough done for dads?
What do you mean by that?
So, I'm probably going to air this bit, but there's a lot of women's groups, there's a lot of female-only groups, but do you think there's enough done for dads?
Single dads, no.
Yeah,
I feel like single dads kind of get a shorthand because, like, well, I wouldn't really know, but from what I've could surmise, they're kind of bought into it and they have no idea, and there aren't really groups for that. But for single mums, for instance, it is a much bigger problem, to be fair.
Yeah.
So they have a lot more support going around within other women as well. You don't really see a lot of single dads helping out other single dads. I would say
less likely to be to the dad anyway is in custody, for example. It's more to the mum.
Like that. There are groups of single
yeah,
dads.
They do exist, but just not at such a degree as
the
other side.
All right. Well, do you think enough is done in the city for dads?
Weirdly enough, this actually is something that is really personal to me at the minute, because my brother is going through it with his partner, and obviously they have kids, and I feel like it's starting to shift towards it being even Stevens, but for a long time, Dad's sort of oh, well, he's not going to want to be involved, and it's going to be the mum who wants to obviously have the kids all the time, and she'll be the one who needs to take care of them, and you can see him on the weekend sort of thing. So I feel like it's getting there, but there definitely needs to be way more of a true equality, I think, which is a weird thing to say because it's one of the few things where men actually are in that's half.
Yeah, word.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I feel like dads kind of get a bad rap sometimes.
So what about support for single dads?
I feel like it should go both ways. Support for people who don't actually have connected families. So people who are single parent, it should just go both ways.
But what about single dads? Do you think there's enough done?
I mean, if we're gonna say something like that, then probably not, because there's not a lot of groups for single dads. But
and I think the stigma around single mums kind of overpowers it, and I don't think people really give that much attention towards single dads. But that's just for me, at least.
Yeah, nice. Right. So,
interesting.
That was the question. What are your thoughts?
I share a lot of that sentiment, and obviously looking at with regards of with the exception of the deli owner, a lot of those people who are answering that question, that's not an environment that maybe they're necessarily used to, so that they wouldn't necessarily be aware anyway. But that doesn't mean what they're saying is wrong. It's not a common thing, support for dads, and whilst we have come a long way with services for dads, there's still a lot more to go, and the gentleman in the deli was right. A lot of attitudes have shifted, and there is more equity for dads. And currently, there's a lot of talk in the Houses of Commons about paternity leave for men and how maybe we need to shift. There's various sort of campaigns out at the moment. Some of them are asking for 6 weeks, some are asking for 6 months, some are asking for equal to the mums. And this all comes down to kind of, we need to look at it as a family situation. And when we're looking at men, whilst the attitudes have shifted and men want to play more of an active role in being a parent, for a long time, particularly when I became a dad, society and the workplace hadn't really shifted to support that. So it was really hard for men to play both role as a family person and an employee. And quite often men would find themselves, for lack of a better word, punished for wanting to go to appointments and play an active role in raising their children, and they'd be sort of penalised. There'd be a kind of a parent, working parent tax on that. However, it's also important to realise white male privilege. So someone like myself in the workplace, I know I am automatically privileged, regardless of what my situation is. We know, obviously, the gender pay gap exists. We know that women, for millennia, have had to deal with working. They stepped up in during World War II. They kept the economy going, all this kind of thing. They were still giving birth, still raising children, all this kind of thing. And ever since then, they've been really up there. But that equity hasn't existed for them. At the same time, that equity hasn't existed in the workplace for men when it comes to families. So what we have to actually look at here is allyship. True equity can only really happen when we've got men advocating for women to have equal pay, better opportunities in the workplace. And we have women saying, men need time off for family appointments too. Men need more time off. Actually, I don't want to lose my partner after 2 weeks paternity leave to go back to work. The recovery rate for somebody who's given birth naturally is more than 2 weeks. And if you're talking cesarean, then we're talking months. So, if that support's there, it's only right. And we're doing things now where we're saying, skin to skin for dad too, and so on, because it's scientifically proven that whilst men don't change outwardly in terms of physical appearances like a mum might do when they're starting to give milk, for instance, it's actually proven that the hormone that produces milk for women becomes present in men too. And we start becoming more in tune, and our hormones change. And so we do have physical changes. We do become more nurturing. We are programmed that way. And so it's only natural. We've gone a long way from men being down the pub when baby's born. Ray, let's wet the baby's head. Dads are there now. They're involved. They have the skin to skin. They want as much paternity as they can. You didn't used to see a man walking down the street with a pushchair. You'll see them all the time now. You didn't tend to see more than a couple of dads in the playground. You'll see 50% of them are dads now. We say men can't show emotion. You go down Fratton Park, you'll see men giving every emotion under the sun. And given the right environment, given permission to, they'll do it in somewhere like here at the Forge too. So they're right, times are changing. There was a question there about maybe systems being more biased towards the mums, but it's shifting a little more. maybe once upon a time that may have been, but in my experience now of having worked with literally thousands of men, and many of those going through various legal systems, either in mediation, through family courts or anything like that, what I can tell you is actually it's not a biased system. It's not necessarily weighted to the mum. And I know hundreds of dads in Portsmouth alone who have parental responsibility and are the main caregiver for the child, sometimes sole caregiver. If you are the right person for that, if you are able to provide for that child and give that child everything that it needs, the courts will be fair. You know, everyone, if you have to work for what's in the best interest of that child, as does the partner. Now, obviously, in the best interest of the child is two people. Now, their relationship may have ended, but that doesn't mean that their relationship with the child has to end, and they've got to come to terms with the fact that they've got this child that binds them together forever now. And, you know, the best solution is some kind of co-parenting relationship where that child still sees the best in both of those people and knows that whilst those people may not necessarily be together, they still respect each other as the other parent of that child and work together. They don't have to talk to each other about other things. They can talk to each other about things. And the courts will always try to work for that. They can. But what tends to happen is sometimes if one parent, and I've seen this both in mums and in dads, if it's not going in their favour or they feel they should have more, they then start going down this route of calling the other person narcissistic or the system is rigged against them. It's not. And generally speaking, in a very few exceptions, the other person isn't narcissistic. There's just a breakdown in that relationship. And so men and women shouldn't jump to narcissism. I've come across genuine narcissistic people. And just because you've at a conflict with another person who happens to be the parent of your child, you shouldn't start by as narcissistic. And I've had to say to many dads, I'm sorry, but you might not be the best person to have the main responsibility for your child, but that's something that we can work on. You know, only when you accept the truth and start working with it, and you start, you know, realizing that you need to work with the system. And sometimes what happens is there might not be any evidence that you are the best person to be with that child, and it may well be. Somebody mentioned that, you only get them at weekends or supervised access. That sucks. It's really shit. But it's a starting point. Prove that you are that person. Be there for your child. Turn up. Don't weaponize them. I see both mums and dads doing this. And don't get hung up with the negativity, or if you are the person receiving that, because all you're doing then is you're living in that bitterness. Instead, focus on that child. Be the best parent that you can. Turn up. The courts, the supervised people at the contact centres they see this all the time. They will see through that behaviour. We see through that behaviour. I know when a dad is giving me BS, and I know when sometimes I'm in contact with the mums and they're trying to pile shade on the dad as well. And I've seen him, and I know from my years of experience that is a perfect dad. So really, gender doesn't come into this. It's not a gender thing. It's not a man and a woman thing. It's not sided one way or the other. It comes down to your relationship with that child, your ability to look after that child. Sometimes there's environmental factors. Maybe you're not living you might be, sometimes dads move out of the family home and they're in shared accommodation, and maybe the people around there, so the courts may not be able to say that the dad can have that child overnight, for instance. And sometimes these little things that dads want, they feel is their right and things, you know. So sometimes it's an environmental thing, but quite often, sometimes you just have to be honest and just go, am I the problem? And only when you do that can we really move forward.
Fair game. Fair. Are they the problem? Big one. I mean, just on that then. So scenario. If, for example, unfortunately, a mother passes away and left with the dad, what support then is then given to that dad if he can't move on? He's too strung up on his wife and he's emotionally invested or whatever. What then? What would you say?
So there's quite a few charities out there that offer bereavement services. We don't offer direct bereavement services. What we do offer is things like our Dad's Chat group, where dads who are in that sort of similar position can come and have a peer support group here in the Ford, coffee, game pool, discussion, chat stuff, which is also linked to NHS talking therapy. So we offer a bit of a pathway into that, so we can provide some of those things. We can link to various organisations that do offer bereavement services. If there's siblings involved, there's organisations such as Simon Says that can work with the children as well. If it's, for instance, maybe they've lost a child, there's SANS that we can put people in contact with. There's numerous organisations, and it's sometimes there's a lot of out of hours ones as well. So sometimes, if those services are closed, there's a lot of phone lines or text services that you can phone and contact for men or women. Important to say, because we can totally reverse that. But you're right, I know dads are exactly in that situation, and I've met women too. Unfortunately, sometimes the most horrendous outcomes happen, and it's really, really hard. But there is help out there. You just need to come to services like us, and we will signpost you and work with you to find that service.
No, fair enough. And I guess, for me, the standout point there is it's not about one side or one party or one mum or a dad. It's about the unit. So I guess we can wrap up with that statement. It's about the family unit. Any final words?
I would say that if anyone is watching and they've been hesitant to maybe seek support, or they're worried about knocking on the door, please don't. Our team are here, and we genuinely care, and we're here to listen. If you find yourself in a situation, we may not be the right people, but we can have a coffee, and maybe, just maybe, that'll help a little, or it could lead to a journey of recovery. If you're feeling alone and isolated, parenting is really hard. Really hard. You don't have to go through that alone. You can find community, you can find your tribe, and we would like to be part of that. And if there's any businesses out there that have listened and want to support us, get in touch.
There it is. Well, Matt, again, it's been really good today. I feel honoured that you spoke to me today, and I'm excited to see what you get up to next.
Thank you. We'll do an update, and we'll see where we are in the future.
Coming soon. But happy days. All right, that brings us to a lovely close.